A radiant light came out from the platform that was located under the enormous green pillar that was floating. The green-haired man appeared next to the dinosaurs that had survived. Izuku, Genesis. "And the recording," he said as he took off his helmet bathed in his own blood. The green-haired man didn't hear any response from him. Because he couldn't hear anything at all, Izuku returned the cryopods to the dinosaurs that were still alive. The green-haired man sat on the ground while leaning on a rock. He was not afraid of death. And that was what scared him. When would his time come? Would that time come? Could that time be right now when he would shoot himself in the head? That was what was going through the green-haired boy's mind as he was about to commit suicide. He had several broken muscles and bones, his ears were destroyed and his body was exhausted. The green-haired boy just shot. And as always he woke up on the bed he placed before entering the spider's nest. The green-haired boy walked through the forest back to his base while playing with the key that had been given to him. Izuku, it's obvious that it's to open something. But what? He asked himself, playing with the key so that it would disappear in a light. It's not time to think about that yet. The good news is that now I have the tech pieces to create, he said with an amused smile. The green-haired man saw the wall that surrounded his base, so he entered without problems. Just to get the attention of his visitor, the green-haired man ignored all of them. Did he need something, or why did they keep seeing him? Izuku, what do you want? Kendo, teethers. Teethers, more of that stuff? Izuku, are you talking about the boss? He asked, and several nodded quickly without knowing 100% what he meant. No, there isn't one here. Well, on this island, he said, mumbling the last thing, remembering his adventure in a completely strange world. I think I gave them enough water and food so that they don't bother me for about 3 days. So see you later. The green-haired boy went home, leaving the young people with even more questions. Once inside his home, the green-haired boy asked Genesis to start creating something while he placed his trophies for defeating the boss. The attention of all the green-haired visitors was called when the earth began to shake, and from the wall they saw how a herd of different animals began to flee. Os, what's going on? Kamakari, a predator? I ask so that the earth trembles. Kendo, whatever it is. It's something too big, he said, so that now they seemed like small tremors. The young men froze when in front of them a huge head appeared with an extremely long neck with plates that looked like rocks. A huge gust of wind passed over the Peverta base, taking away trees and a damned T-Rex due to a blow from the Titanosaurus tail 3. Komori, now we are going to die. Everyone watched as the Titanosaurus stared at them while the green-haired dinosaurs growled. A shower of blood, flesh and brains occurred as the Titanosaur's enormous body fell to the ground. A cry of excitement caught the attention of everyone who was bathed in Titanosaurus blood to see the green-haired man with an overly advanced rifle in one of his hands. Izuku, LOL. The green-haired man knew it perfectly. The tech things were very useful and powerful against 98% of the dinosaurs he had faced. The green-haired man erased his smile when he saw his visitors, which had traumatized him even more. Izuku, since you can use the showers that I use. Izuku knew it. He knew that this time he had screwed up, and well. Accepting your mistake is the meaning of maturity. The green-haired boy let out a sigh as he listened to the younger ones having fun while they showered, and he took inventory of the materials he still had. Izuku, I'm missing the 3 artifacts and I have to go for Megalodon teeth, he thought while looking at the square that showed the inventory of one of the cabinets, but then someone entered the room. Ragdoll, this. Do you have a moment? He asked with his hair a little wet, a shirt that was too big for him and some shorts that were covered by the shirt. Izuku, yes, what do you need? He asked as the inventory square of the wardrobe disappeared. Ragdoll, the boys told us something and I wanted to know if. What is that? He asked in shock while pointing at something on the wall above the green-haired boy. Izuku, oh that, he said after turning to see what Ragdoll was pointing at. It's just my victory trophy, he said, seeing the head of the great spider hanging on the wall. Ragdoll, so what they told us is true, he said in a murmur. Why? Izuku, why, what? Ragdoll, why? Are you doing all this? Izuku, survival? Return home? Instinct? The truth is I don't know anymore. So many years that it's already normal for me to kill whatever comes my way, he said, sitting on a box. Maybe I do it just to not think about committing suicide. Although it's impossible, he said, letting out a laugh. Ragdoll noticed several emotions in what the green-haired boy said. Izuku stood up while stretching. Genesis had taken care of everything necessary to go out and collect what he was missing. Izuku, maybe I'll bring you some fish so you don't just eat meat with fruits, he said as he left, but his wrist was grabbed, making him stop. Ragdoll, take care. Okay? Izuku, I can't die, he said with a smile so Ragdoll would let go of him. The green-haired boy left his base so that his thylacoleo appeared after a whistle. The green-haired boy left the safe zone that was his base heading to the most remote area of the island on the coast while he felt equality in his chest. Izuku, Oki. It shouldn't take long, he said sitting on a branch watching the sea. The sea was red. Because of the many Carnotaurus that lay dead on the coast, staining the sea with their blood. At that point, fins began to appear in the sea so that the green-haired man could stand up. In Izuku's hands appeared the tech rifle. With a single shot into the sea a large amount of water rose as well as blood and flesh. Genesis, 25 raw fish got, announcement for the green-haired boy to let out a sigh while reloading his weapon on his shoulder. Izuku, this will take time. Everything was calm after several tough days for the young heroes. They had taken a good shower after several days and had a good meal. But then the calm comes the storm. The attention of several was called when a loud bang resounded on one of the walls. The wall began to be destroyed by sharp claws. A red smoke began to rise over the breaks. The Gigantosaurus stood up to the fear of many when the wall was broken. The Gigantosaurus let out a roar when an Allosaurus entered the area of the walls with a red smoke surrounding it. Fire. Destruction. Chaos. Death. That was all that was happening at the base of the green-haired one. The Gigantosaurus lay on the ground massacred. The body of the Gigantosaurus continued to be devoured by the Allosaurus that expelled red smoke from its body. The Allosaurus devoured the prey that could give it the most meat. Since it devoured the small ones in one bite. The survivors who had managed to hide from that monster would not hesitate too long when the beast ran out of food. A huge explosion occurred where the Allosaurus was. A large amount of smoke, blood and burnt carrion came out of that explosion. Izuku arrived at the chaos with a neutral expression. From the smoke came the Allosaurus with some burns to roar when he saw the green-haired man. Izuku, I've never been attacked by one in my own base, he thought as the tech rifle appeared in his hands. Maybe it was attracted by the number of humans, he thought to shoot a tech bullet at the Allosaurus. The bullet hit directly in the head of the Allosaurus, exploding on impact. The body of the Allosaurus began to release more red smoke while the green-haired let out a sigh only to see how those who were still breathing left his base. A slap was connected in the face of the green-haired only for him to watch with boredom. Yaoyorozu, where were you? You should protect us, she screamed through tears. Her friends had been devoured by the Allosaurus. Izuku, do you think I care about your tears? He asked passing by Yaoyorozu. I was planning to return in 3 days. Be thankful that I was told that my friends died, he said as he entered the base seeing several still in shock or terrified. A few hours after what happened, the green-haired man was on the roof of his base with several Argentavis on it. Something about those dinosaurs that released red smoke was that they attracted more predators and made them even more aggressive. The green-haired boy knew that this area was going to become a slaughterhouse for T-Rex, Spinosaurus, Allosaurus, Carnotaurus or Gigantosaurus, and he didn't want to stay to find out what would happen next. Ragdoll, what? What are you doing? I asked looking at the green-haired boy after climbing onto the roof. Izuku, this place is no longer safe. Ragdoll, you will leave us. Izuku, I should, he said sharply, the only thing that has still caused is inconvenience. Ragdoll could only look down as he clenched his fists. So this was how his life would end. This was how it would all end. Izuku, how many died? I asked as if it were something normal. Ragdoll, D from Class A. 6 died apart from the 6 already deceased and their tutor. From Class B we lost 4 and we have 2 seriously injured and their teacher lost an arm. And Tiger. He sacrificed himself to give us time, he said, holding back the urge to cry. Izuku, so they no longer have adults who can control those brats, he said so that Ragdoll bit his lip. How many are there? Ragdoll, under 30. Izuku tell them to be here on the roof in 5 hours. Those who aren't here can forget about seeing me again, he said as he got on one of the Argentavis and the others began to follow him. Yaoyorozu, who does that bastard think he is? We won't follow him, she screamed angrily after receiving a warning from one of the Pussycat members. Tsuyu, maybe. We should think about it, Yao, Momo. Yaoyorozu, no. Uraka, Ashido and Jiru were cruelly devoured by that thing, she shouted for Tsuyu to lower her head. I'm right, right Os-kun? Os, Yes, you are right. Todoroki, what are we going to do, President? Are we going with him or are we staying here? He asked, causing Ida to let out a sigh. Ida, the safest thing is to go with him. But we have to be clear about something, he said. drawing the attention of his companions. Maybe. We won't be able to go back home, so are you sure? Tokoyami, if there is any chance to go back. We have to hold on to it, he said. So Koda nodded. Hagakure, guys. I'm going with you too, she said to the surprise of the four. Ida, we thought you would stay with Tsuyu and Yaoyorozu. Hagakure, I want to go back home. I want to go back to Mama. If there is a chance. Kamakiri, sensei. Some of them want to stay, he said, looking at Vlad King, who had his entire torso on the right side bandaged because of his missing arm. Vlad King, how are Hononuki and Bondo? Kamakiri, their wounds have stopped bleeding. Kodai and Setsuna are taking care of them. Vlad King, who wants to stay? Kamakiri, Shiozaki, Komori, Shishida, Kuroiro, Kabura and Kendo, but Tetsu is talking and answers last. Vlad King, I will stay with them, they are my obligation. Kamakiri, sensei. Vlad King, I'll leave you in charge of Mandalay and his group. That day, after a carnage while the sun was setting, a huge shadow appeared in the sky heading towards the roof of the base where they were waiting for the green-haired boy. The huge bird landed on the roof of the base while carrying a platform with a structure on its back. The green-haired man left the structure to see those who would go with him. Izuku, come on. Without saying anything else, they began to climb up, carrying the wounded and the few things they had with them. While the others tried to gather what was left of the Pellaverde base while they watched the Quetzal take flight towards the interior of the island. Those who could saw through a window in the structure huge trees with thylacoleos in them that were terrifying. Until in the distance they saw several structures in trees connected by bridges. Apparently they had arrived at a safer home. The huge flying dinosaur entered a structure so that it could land on the platform. The green-haired man got off the Quetzal's mount to give the dinosaur some fish. Izuku went to the entrance of the structure that the Quetzal was carrying to open it. The green-haired man saw the 16 students, the 3 adults and the child get off. 2 of them were seriously injured but out of danger of death. The green-haired man removed the structure of the Quetzal mount to order him to go to one of the booths he had created to look at the group. Izuku, I hope you follow the rules this time, he said, so that several nodded. Follow me, he said, leaving the dinosaur garage. Several students gulped when they saw how high it was. And how long the bridges were that connected the structures. Izuku, first. Don't go out without my approval, he said, so that several shots could be heard in the distance, or you will become one of them's food. The green-haired boy continued walking while the students watched as a thylacoleo had fallen from a great height, completely riddled with bullets. The green-haired boy opened a large door so that the group that was with him could enter. The interior of that structure had a very warm and homely atmosphere. Izuku, they will stay here. There is food, bathrooms, bedrooms and a small infirmary, he said, looking at the 2 wounded that the young people were carrying. Mandalay, thank you. Thank you for not leaving us alone. Izuku, just don't fuck around, he said as he headed for the exit. Kendo, will you take care of our companions? He asked, referring to his companions who stayed at the previous base. Izuku, yes. The green-haired man left that house where that group that had been bothering him so much would stay. While he was heading to his base to prepare the preparations to go for the last artifact that he needed to go for the second boss, he was thinking about the words of the frog-haired man, take care of his companions? He only said yes so that there would be no problems, but he didn't care at all about any of them. Why did he help them then? Pity? Pride? Values? Breasts? Principles? Heroism? He didn't know exactly. But it wasn't the time to think about that. He had a key and he wanted to know if the second chief would give him another one or what would happen. The green-haired man was sitting on a wooden chair while he moved a rifle bullet between his fingers. The green-haired man would see on the table where he had his feet up a hologram that projected Genesis. The green-haired boy would see on the table where he had his feet up a hologram that Genesis was projecting. 3. Izuku, unlike the spider. This bastard's terrain is a damn death trap. If one of the dinosaurs he carries falls off those cliffs, I can consider them dead. How many did I lose the first time I faced him? The green-haired boy closed his eyes, remembering the huge ape's move set. He threw gigantic rocks, deadly blows that made cliffs retreat, and finally he could summon a large number of Gigantopithecus that were more annoying than the small spiders that the boss spider summons. Izuku, the problem is not either of them. But him, he said, so that Genesis changed the projected image and a huge roar echoed through the room. If not, he said as Genesis changed the projected image and a huge roar echoed through the room. Izuku, when I finished with him for the first time. He sent me to the desert. This time nothing can happen since they gave me this key, he said, so that the key appeared in his hand. Genesis, do you know anything? Genesis, no, there is no information about that item in my database. Izuku, well. I'll go get the missing artifact and then we'll see what happens. I just hope those brats don't keep screwing things up, he said to throw the rifle bullet and it would collide with the spider trophy. Ragdoll got out of his sleeping bag only to see the fireplace that was kept lit so that the room where everyone slept stayed warm. Ragdoll, or as her real name was Tomoko Shiritoko, couldn't sleep. She had several things on her mind and most of them always led to the same thing. The green-haired boy who took care of them. Tomoko saw through a small window the house where the green-haired boy was, in which it was seen that he was still doing something. The green-haired man was shirtless as he fed materials into all the machines. Gunpowder, steel, bullets, narcotics, tranquilizers, traps, saddles and animal food were the most common materials created in the green-haired man's machines. The green-haired man stopped working when he saw his reflection in a freshly baked ingot. Izuku, what a physique I have, he murmured, noticing how fit he was. I no longer look like the sardine I was when I arrived, he said, letting out a small laugh, remembering that he couldn't even lift a log before. The green-haired boy stopped looking at his body to continue working. He would wait until dawn to go out and look for the artifacts and tame one or another dinosaur. The sound of a river current could be heard in the distance. Amidst the darkness a small light could be seen. El Peverda was in front of a campfire waiting for his food to cook, while behind him his Thylacoleo was sleeping. The green-haired boy had obtained the first artifact to go against the second boss. The artifact of the pack was the name of the artifact that he had recently obtained. Izuku quickly pointed his shotgun at the darkness and fired. Seconds later the body of an Onik emerged from the darkness dead. The green-haired boy took a piece of cooked meat out of the fire, and while he was eating, he remembered all the hell he lived through the first time he tried to enter one of the caves that contained one of the artifacts. Bakugo Katsuki kept himself as far away from everyone as possible. Fear, his body was completely scared every time he saw the green-haired boy, since he saw how he killed others without his pulse shaking. Bakugo, stop. Stop shaking, he said, holding his arm tightly. Bakugo watched as the green-haired boy spoke to the leader of the wild pussy cat while being bothered by the blonde of the group. Hagakure, everything okay? I asked, noticing after several times the strange attitude of the proud ash-haired when the green-haired boy was present. Bakugo, what the fuck do you care? He said reluctantly to the girl who just let out a sigh. It was always the same. Izuku, I'll be back in 3 or 4 days, he said, getting rid of Pixie Bob. You know what the consequences are of doing something outside of here. Mandalay, death, we know it, she said, holding on to Pixie Bob after the green-haired boy got her off of her. Izuku, they have food for 7 days, don't let it spoil or it will contaminate the rest, he said so that Mandalay would nod. Store clean water just in case, some animal may break the pipes. Mandalay, understood. May I ask where you are going? Izuku, I'll go hunting, he said, to leave where the green-haired visit was staying. The sun was beginning to set. In a river that was going downstream, the water of it was beginning to turn more and more red, attracting some carnivores. The green-haired man was on top of the corpse of a Spinosaurus while he looked at his inventory. Izuku, Spinosaurus crests obtained, I only need the 2 artifacts and the Pterosaurus claws, he said, closing his inventory and getting on his Thylacoleo. The green-haired boy, while moving on the Thylacoleo, looked at the map that Genesis had given him of the island. The map had marked the location of the entrance to the caves where the 2 artifacts he needed were. Izuku was making his bones rattle while a huge shadow covered him and his animals. The green-haired man was under the red-colored obelisk preparing to finish off that monkey. Izuku, let's start with this, he said so that Genesis appeared on one side of this. Genesis, start recording? Izuku, no, he said to open his inventory and have his iron armor changed to a polymer one. They shouldn't care what I do, he said so that his tech rifle would manifest in his hands. The green-haired man had been in a bad mood the last few days. He felt that his body needed something, but neither the system/Genesis nor he himself knew what was happening to him. He had eaten and drank well and even slept even though he didn't need it, but nothing had helped. The green-haired boy saw how a dome appeared surrounding the entire platform on which they were standing. The dome surrounded them completely so that the warm climate would make one completely wintry. The dome completely surrounded them so that the warm climate would make a completely wintry one disappear. The green-haired man saw the fall that seemed to have no end. At that, an immense roar that disturbed the animals was heard, as well as some immense footsteps. The green-haired man let out a whistle so that the Uteranus let out a roar and the other animals got ready. Izuku prepared his rifle for an accurate shot at his enemy's head, but then a shadow covered him, making the green-haired man look up. Izuku, son of a bitch. A large figure fell in the middle of all of Izuku's dinosaurs just like a large avalanche of snow. The green-haired man saw a huge hand lift up as if nothing had happened, one of the T-Rex he had brought with him. The T-Rex was thrown off the cliff to a certain death so that Izuku could see the culprit. The green-haired man shot the Megapithecus several times in the face, causing simple burns. The green-haired man shot the Megapithecus several times in the face, causing simple burns. 2 T-Rexes launched themselves at the boss while the green-haired man continued to shoot. The Megapithecus hit both T-Rexes, throwing them into the void, only to receive a bite from a T-Rex that had not fallen. The green-haired boy quickly analyzed the situation. He only had 4 T-Rex left and little energy from the tech rifle while he had lost around 6 T-Rex, the Uteranyus and the pig just starting the battle. There was only one thing left for Izuku to do when he saw the serious situation. The Megapithecus with its enormous foot crushed the head of the T-Rex that had attacked it as if it were nothing. In that 2 more T-Rex launched themselves against it, ramming it against the wall behind it. With one of its hands it removed both T-Rexes, sending one to the cliff and the other almost falling. But in that several large rocks began to fall from the mountain that surrounded them. Hundreds of Mesopithecus appeared to help their leader in this fight. The last T-Rex made its presence felt, attacking the Megapithecus, but the latter simply grabbed it by the head and crushed it with one of its hands, roaring at the green-haired man who looked at it with a smile without his helmet. "Izuku, let's see if this is your size, son of a bitch," he said, pressing a button. The body of the T-Rex that was still in the hand of the Megapithecus gave off a light. A huge explosion shook the whole area due to the C4 explosives that the green-haired man had attached to the T-Rex before it launched its attack. The area collapsed due to the explosion, sending everything to the cliff due to an avalanche of snow. The green-haired man's vision was blurry as he had a hard time breathing. His entire body was destroyed due to the fall and he was in terrible suffering before dying. Izuku watched as one of the Megapithecus hands appeared from the darkness of the area. The green-haired man could only curse at being defeated, but then the huge hand fell to the ground suddenly while a roar of pain resounded throughout the place. The green-haired man could barely make out the figures. He only noticed how something bigger than the Megapithecus grabbed him by the shoulders to devour his head as if it were nothing. The green-haired man saw how a blue key appeared, so he made a last effort to drag himself away with difficulty while he listened to that thing tearing and swallowing the flesh of the Megapithecus. The green-haired boy took the key while blood came out from all the wounds he had gotten from the fall. In that a pair of blue eyes saw the green-haired boy who had the key, so a dome began to surround him. "Izuku, Gra, Sias, Ma, Uldi, too," he said as more blood fell from his mouth. An immense roar was heard throughout the darkness just at the moment that the green-haired man disappeared, thanks to the dome. The green-haired boy was lying on the ground under the red obelisk, only for the key to fall to the ground. The green-haired boy had died. Again. I had lost count of how many times I had died on the various prehistoric islands. I had died from rotten food, eaten alive by small, medium, large and giant animals. I had fallen from such high places that I was crushed when I crashed. He had been pierced by the claws, fangs and horns of the beasts that inhabited the island. He had been charred when his house once burned down when a lightning bolt struck it. He had died from diseases caused by wounds caused by animals. And he had died at the hands of another human. Izuku listened to the sound of the furnaces melting metal inside. He had managed to defeat the mountain monkey, and proof was the key that appeared along with the key he was given when he finished off the spider in his inventory. "Izuku, what the fuck? They didn't give me the tech material," he said with a sigh as he got out of bed. The green-haired boy, once standing, approached the cupboards to take out a suit of steel armor and a shotgun with a couple of bullets and pick up some food. Once prepared, he left his home to call his Argentavis and go for the things that were left in the area of the red obelisk. While flying above the huge bird, the green-haired boy began to hear increasingly heavy footsteps. Izuku ordered the bird to stop in the air when he saw a huge figure larger than the trees in the forest that were there alone to see the enormous destroyed body of a Giganosaurus in one of the mountains, only to see a head calmly eating the leaves of the trees. "Izuku, this may be a problem. Or maybe not," he said, watching as the huge dinosaur moved away, bypassing the trees in its path without a problem. "Or maybe not," he said, watching as the huge dinosaur moved away, bypassing the trees in its path without any problem. 3. The green-haired man got off the Argentavis only to see his body being devoured by some small scavenger dinosaurs who ran away when they saw the huge Argentavis landing near their meal. Izuku approached his body that was devoured by those small dinosaurs to collect what was still useful to him and his tech rifle with the last of the tech material he had left. An axe appeared in Izuku's hand so that he could throw it at the small dinosaur, killing it instantly. "Izuku, "These are just a plague," he said while feeding the corpse to the Argentavis. Izuku played with the 2 keys he had obtained. He didn't remember any door that needed keys when he went through all the worlds full of beasts in which he had lived, and for him there were only 2 options. A way out or be eternally in an endless loop. The first one sounded the best, but he had been alone for so long that even when people came he was not interested in living with them. Nature was his new home and he had already become accustomed to it. Bakugo Katsuki couldn't sleep at night as he missed his home. The screams of his mother and the calm of his father, Katsuki still couldn't get over how his classmates were mercilessly killed by those monsters and how the cold hands of the dead touched his shoulders. The memories of the blows against him while he asked for help while he simply laughed with his friends. The terror of dying tormented Katsuki every night and more at the hands of the one who was once his best friend. The green-haired boy was eating a piece of meat after roasting it a little. He didn't have many memories of the society he came from. He only remembers the only person who showed him affection. His mother was the reason why the green-haired boy wanted to get out of this prehistoric nightmare. "Izuku, Genesis," he said so that the small robot floated around him, "make a list of what is necessary to go to the dragon territory." Genesis, "Understood," he said so that I could start looking for the requested data. The green-haired boy continued eating while he thought about how much weaponry he should carry to finish off that beast that flew and spit fire. "Pixie Bob, how much longer do you think we'll be staying here?" I asked from the top floor of the bunk bed I was sleeping in. "Ragdoll, what do you mean?" "Pixie Bob, the other place was attacked. Which tells us this one won't be either." She asked so a pillow would hit her. "Hey, Mandalay, don't be positive," she said with a frown. "You know that the fall from here would only kill us." "Pixie Bob, I think it would be better than being eaten alive," she said as she lay down, "but I wouldn't complain if it was that green-haired guy who ate me." "Mandalay, then we will give you as a sacrifice," she said tiredly with her arms crossed. "Pixie Bob, I'm just playing." "Ragdoll, I wonder if they are looking for us." 40 young people, 5 professional heroes and a civilian had disappeared in a mountain camp. After days without communication, the authorities went to the location of the camp where they only found pure ashes. Someone had set everything on fire, controlling the fire so that it would not attract attention. Society could not understand how the great Academy of UA could have let 40 young people disappear as if nothing had happened. Although people did not want to admit it, it was very possible that they had all been turned to ashes in the flames. Tears and lawsuits were quick to fall when the news became public. The UA had received a hard blow like the world of heroes, since not even the symbol of peace could protect its students. The green-haired man was counting his supplies, which were getting fewer and fewer until they reached 0. Maybe he could farm for 2 or 3 months to prepare himself properly, but he already wanted to get off this dinosaur island and find out if the keys would open another exit or if he would simply continue with the endless loop. The little tech material that was left would be used for ammunition for his tech rifle along with around 60 missiles to divert the dragon. That's why he wasn't sure about going for that fire-breathing beast, and he still had to collect all the materials to enter what would surely be certain death. Bringing animals was not very safe either, since he would simply bring them so that the beast could feed on them. With a sigh, the green-haired man began to put away everything he had crafted to put on a steel armor and go out to look for the necessary artifacts and animal objects. The green-haired man walked through the snow, leaving behind the bodies of several Uteranus that began to be devoured by the scavengers of the area after he removed the lungs of 5 in particular. Dozens of megalodons gathered as the sea was stained with blood and ink, while Izuku swam to the shore wearing a diving suit after extracting Basilosaurus fat and Tusoteuthis tentacles. The herbivores fled in fear as the roar of a Giganotosaurus was heard throughout the area, so that the animal's head was caressed by the green-haired boy and he began to search for what he needed among all the carnage that was there. Tyrannosaurus arms, Allosaurus brains, and Giganotosaurus hearts. "Izuku, only the artifacts would be missing," he said, bathed in blood after extracting the last thing he needed from the corpses. The group that Izuku decided to keep alive saw him arrive at the house a few trees ahead of them. It seemed that he had just come from committing a massacre because of all the blood that covered his armor, and they were not wrong. "Mandalay, I think we should talk to him. We can't stay like this for the rest of our lives." "Pixie Bob, why? We have food, water and a roof. What more do you want, woman?" "Ragdoll, what it means is that we can't be locked in the same time forever," he said after letting out a sigh and shaking his head. "Pixie Bob, oh, you're kind of right. Tomoko, go talk to him." "Ragdoll, why me?" "Pixie Bob, you know that," she said, crossing her arms, "I will not have this conversation with you again." Ragdoll sighed to stand up while Mandalay shook her head at the attitude of her two companions. Ragdoll walked along the bridge that connected both facilities while the sun was setting. The woman looked at the beautiful landscape while the sun was setting, a pity that the beauty of nature could also be so lethal. Ragdoll continued walking a little faster when the automatic turrets fired at what was surely an animal that was trying to climb into its homes. Once she arrived at the house where the green-haired boy spent his time, she sighed with relief to knock on the door and not get any answer. The green-haired boy arrived at his base that he used at the beginning when he started from scratch for the second time on this island. Izuku got off his Argentavis with a shotgun in hand to begin to annihilate the spiders that were in the area. "Izuku, it seems something attacked them," he said, finishing off a spider, seeing an open door where the spiders had come out from. The green-haired boy continued walking, followed by his Argentavis, only to see a couple of corpses on the ground and inside several cocoons. Apparently following the girl was not a great idea. She had big breasts but not much idea of how to survive without her quirk. The green-haired continued into the cave after giving the order to the Argentavis to stay on the roofs of the structures that were still standing. Dozens of footsteps and grunts were heard, so that the green-haired only continued forward. Izuku entered his home with his armor destroyed, with cuts too serious on his body. The last thing he could do before collapsing was to lean against the wall as he slowly fell to the cold ground, but at least he had managed it in a couple of hours and not weeks like the first time he discovered the artifacts, and also, thanks to the help of Genesis. The green-haired man's vision was blurry due to his wounds, but despite that he managed to see a figure approaching him. What he was missing was some animal that had managed to sneak in, but before everything went dark the green-haired man felt a warmth that he hadn't felt for quite some time while he waited for this endless loop to end soon. The green-haired boy woke up only to let out a tired sigh. With a thought, he asked Genesis to give him the report of his status so that the little robot would float around him. "Genesis, stable state, wounds have been treated correctly, risk probability 25%, he said while the green-haired man listened. The green-haired boy sat on the bed he woke up in, frowning as he felt his whole body burning with pain while his wounds were bandaged. He had survived something that was not so common, knowing that he came back to life after dying. He preferred to die dozens of times than to endure wounds that a person could not survive. The green-haired man stood up only to sigh. His current injuries would leave someone hospitalized for weeks or a couple of months to recover, or at least be able to move without help. At that, the green-haired man smelled a food aroma that was not simply roasted meat or fish. Tomoko sighed as she looked at the food preparation she had prepared. According to her knowledge, the green-haired boy who was taking care of them could come back to life without any problems, but letting him die on the ground as if he were an animal did not seem humane to her. Ragdoll opened her eyes in surprise when she saw the green-haired boy sitting on the other side of the campfire in front of her. She thought that the green-haired boy would be in bed for many more hours and not just a couple of hours, which was what happened after she arrived at midnight. "Izuku, were you a doctor?" he asked so Ragdoll would come out of his surprise. Ragdoll, and no, they teach us the basics at the academy so we can get first aid in case of an emergency while we work as heroes, he said so the green-haired boy would nod. "Izuku, what were you doing here?" I asked so Ragdoll would get nervous. "Ragdoll, I wanted to talk to you about the situation we're in." "Izuku, tell me. Do you hate me for letting those children die?" I asked so Ragdoll would look at the ground. "Ragdoll, I don't know. You've kept us safe, fed us, and given us a roof over our heads. So I don't know," she said to look Izuku in the eyes as he put out the fire in the campfire. "Izuku, it was going to burn soon," he said to craft some bowls with the system. "Soon something will happen. So just be patient," he said while serving the stew to give one to Ragdoll. Ragdoll, "Okay. I'll tell the others," he said while the green-haired boy was eating. Izuku spent the rest of the night with the girl before dawn to finish preparing before he has to spend months returning to farm or see what will happen. Ragdoll, he's doing something. He said to be patient, he said looking at his teammates. Mandalay, okay, we've been here for weeks, holding on a little longer won't be anything. Pixie Bob, and that was all you did? She asked flirtatiously, hugging Ragdoll so that she shook her head. The earth was dead as rivers of lava passed through the cracks of the earth. In that a bright dome appeared on that dead land, only for several dinosaurs along with someone to appear. Only for a roar to be heard from the air. From among the ruins of the castle a monstrous figure was seen so that the green-haired man sighed while the tech rifle appeared in his hands to prepare for this fight. Or massacre when his enemy landed on the ground while roaring ferociously. With a whistle Izuku ordered his animals to spread out across the area just as the enormous beast roared a flame from its mouth. The dragon let out a growl when a missile hit its face to see the culprit on a Tyrannosaurus rex. With a whistle, Izuku ordered his animals to spread out across the area just as the huge beast roared a flame from its mouth. The dragon let out a growl when a missile hit his face to see the culprit on a Tyrannosaurus Rex spinning around him. The dragon roared before stretching its wings and taking flight into the sky while the green-haired boy reloaded the missile launcher to fire again, but then the dragon released a flame around the entire area. Several dinosaurs began to run between, calling only for another projectile to hit the dragon, and it growled. The projectiles continued to hit the dragon while the dinosaurs dodged the flames, some with more luck than others, while Izuku continued to fire missiles at the dragon. The green-haired boy rolled on the ground when the dinosaur he was on was sent flying by a tail whip from the dragon. The green-haired boy got up from the floor only to see the huge dragon a few meters away from him. Before the dragon could do anything, a Tyrannosaurus Rex appeared in the flames attacking the dragon, who roared with annoyance, feeling several bites on his body and legs. An explosion occurred in the dragon's mouth from Izuku, who shot at the dragon again. The dragon stretched its wings to go back to the sky, but in those some holes began to appear in one of its wings thanks to the shots of the tech rifle. The dragon growled to throw one of the dinosaurs into the rivers of lava, ending its life. But in that a spear was stuck in its eye so that it roared with anger, leaving one of its eyes blind. The difference between the monkey and the dragon was one thing, and that was the arms, since the monkey could get the animals off of him without any problems while the dragon took longer to hold them in his jaw, making the head an easier target. But not so easy to end his life. Another flame came out of the dragon's mouth, burning several dinosaurs mercilessly, leaving the green-haired one more and more alone in the infernal arena. Another missile shook the dragon's head only for a Spinosaurus to bite its neck, trying to keep it from moving. The dragon killed the Spinosaurus by crushing it against the ground with the help of its enormous body, but in that more projectiles began to hit its scales. Running out of supplies and allies, the green-haired man loaded the last of the tech material into his rifle and began to shoot everything at the dragon's head. The dragon roared angrily, feeling the shots hitting the same target, and that was his wounded eye. With a blow of his tail, the green-haired man flew against the ruins in the area so that the dragon finished off the last living beings in his area. The green-haired boy spat blood. He had faced so many things that were beyond imagination, but still, he couldn't defeat the first beings he had faced. Maybe if he had prepared himself a little more, he wouldn't be on the verge of losing everything. But he wouldn't wait for the slightest chance of getting out of that nightmare. In his hands appeared the missile launcher while the dragon roared victoriously in the middle of the arena. Another explosion occurred in the face of the dragon so that it roared in pain. The tech shots had had their consequences. The dragon turned to see the ruins with his only eye, only to see the green-haired man standing with his stomach bleeding since it had been burst by the blow. Izuku fell to his knees with half his body burned, only to smile as the dragon's massive body lay on the ground behind him. So much damage had damaged the dragon's brain, and with that the chance of finishing it off was greater. The green-haired man saw how the two keys he had obtained previously were combined with a red one he had just obtained so that they became one, and Genesis appeared. "Genesis, congratulations player for completing the tutorial," he said as Izuku fell to the ground. "Now that you have completed the tutorial, the system features have been unlocked. The tutorial errors have been successfully fixed. Congratulations, now you can come back." Detective Tsukuchi lit a cigarette as he looked at the facilities that belonged to the rescue hero group Pussycats. 40 students, 6 professional heroes and a civilian had disappeared without a trace. There was no information about their whereabouts, and not even the best detectives or computer scientists could give any information about this event, having spent almost a week searching for them non-stop. There have always been more disappearances, and they increased after the strange became normal, but a disappearance like this had not been seen in years. This had a much greater meaning. At that point, the lights in the buildings began to fail at a high speed while the car alarms began to sound non-stop. The air was completely different, even being in the middle of a forest resulting from the hand of man and nature. There were 19 of the 47 missing people who appeared out of nowhere in the Pussycats facilities. The news was not long in being communicated to the emergency media and to the heroes. Detective Tsukakui along with several of his companions were quick to recognize the faces of the children and the 3 professional heroes to help them. But there was something that worried them, and that was a person with an ancient armor standing looking at the sky. "Genesis, all system functions have been unlocked," he said as a screen appeared in front of Izuku. Every material, object, food, weapon, structure and animal was at his disposal thanks to the system. New functions that he had not seen had appeared. Izuku was so focused on seeing the new functions that he did not notice a rumble that was heard throughout the area while the children were helped by the adults. "All Might Tsukuchi. Who is he?" he asked, seeing the green-haired boy still standing. "Tsukuchi, we don't know yet. He was just there." "Mandalay, he is the one who has kept us alive," she said without stopping hugging her nephew. Tsukuchi, what do you mean? Where have you been these 2 weeks? At that point a silhouette began to appear little by little, larger than even Mount Lady, until it began to become physical and let out a roar as cold as Antarctica. Lady until it began to become physical so that it would let out a roar as cold as Antarctica. Even All Might himself stepped back when he saw that beast appear in front of them. The Ice Titan lowered his head so that the armored man, Izuku, could caress his enormous head so that seconds later he disappeared again as he appeared. All Might was going with a stranger to stay in shock when he saw for a moment some green eyes, freckles and green hair when he changed his helmet for a more technological one. In that everyone present saw how a mythological beast appeared before their eyes. A dragon appeared for Izuku to ride and he flew to the sky without saying a word. A woman who was abandoned by her wife and her only son disappeared without a trace will make anyone fall to the bottom, but she still had hope that her son would still appear. Because he was her hero. Inko Midoriya let tears fall from her eyes as she watched the recordings of her son when he was just a child before his dream was shattered at a young age. Inko put the recordings away and headed to the dining room of her apartment, which was in a lonely silence. While drinking a glass of water, Inko heard a lot of commotion in the neighborhood, something not so common for a quiet neighborhood like the one she lived in. Maybe it was some hero passing by, but then the sound of someone knocking lightly on the door could be heard. She wasn't expecting anyone today, so she just thought it was some package. But then the sound of small knocks was heard again, so Inko could go to the door. When she opened the door, the words wouldn't come out of her mouth while her eyes filled with tears. She could never forget that green hair like hers but messy, his cheeks full of freckles and those green eyes. Izuku, I came back home, mother, he said while kneeling on one of her legs. The green-haired boy was hugged by his mother as he cried and screamed, releasing all the pain he had felt during those months. For her it was only 10 months while the green-haired boy lasted 10 years in that nightmare. So after so much time the green-haired boy shed some tears when he was finally able to be back home. The news that 18 of the 47 disappeared shook Japan and the world of heroes, but something was wrong. The families of the other disappeared wanted someone to blame and the authorities could only point to one person. Kota, Aunt. Where did he go? Mandalay, I don't know. Let's just hope they don't make a mistake, she said, knowing what the green-haired boy was capable of. Pixie Bob, do you think we'll see him again? Mandalay, I think. This is just the beginning. Ragdoll wondered where someone like the green-haired boy had gone, who had not been in contact with modern society for several months. Inko, where have you been all this time? She asked, wiping her tears, looking at her boy who just smiled a little. Izuku, in a prehistoric nightmare, he said, only for her to stand up when her instincts were alarmed. Can you wait a little? Then I'll tell you everything I experienced, he said for Inko to nod. The green-haired boy left his apartment only to see from the 5th floor where he was seeing several patrols and heroes on the main street, only for the dragon to roar at the heroes and police from the roof of the building. The tech armor appeared all over his body so that he went down from the 5th floor to the street and landed on his feet without any damage, only to see in front of him a man on fire with a serious look. The Eternal Number 2 saw how someone had the courage to stand in front of him. He was the only one to blame for the disappearance of the UA brats. He was not there for his masterpiece but to fix what All Might could not do. Before the fire hero spoke, there were loud footsteps while a woman's scream was heard, so that from among the apartments one of the patrols was crushed as if it were a soda can, and a roar was heard from a Giganotosaurus. At that the heroes saw how more species of extinct animals began to surround them through the buildings and streets so that Endeavor could see who was in front of him who looked so calm. Izuku, it's up to you. We start a conflict in which many will die. Or today everyone returns home, he said, looking at Endeavor without feelings. Endeavor, we are retreating, he said to the other heroes and policemen. The heroes and police watched as those animals that you could only see in museums began to disappear little by little until there was nothing left of them. Endeavor watched as that guy in front of him disappeared without a trace. The green-haired boy entered his room, which was still the same as he had left it after talking to his mother about what had happened. Izuku felt a little uncomfortable being used to natural colors instead of those bright colors that the blonde man showed. Heroes and villains, something that had not interested him since he was trapped on that desert island, and currently he only wanted to make up for the time he had lost while he was trapped. From being just a 15-year-old boy to a 25-year-old adult was a very big change. Living in nature for 10 years and changing that overnight was something he still couldn't get used to. Izuku, Genesis, he said so that the robot appeared around him, is there something I have to do? Genesis, no, there is no task. Do you want to include a task? Izuku, tell me. Who created the system that took me to those worlds? He asked, looking at the gem on his wrist that had not disappeared. Genesis, That information is not available, he said, so Izuku sighed. The green-haired boy looked out his window at the city he had lived in as a child. He knew one thing, and that was that they would not sit back and watch knowing that he was free. Humans could sometimes be simple knowing that they feared what they could not control, but he did not fear them. He had faced more dangerous things with a crossbow and spear. Even listening to the testimony of the survivors that Izuku Midoriya, the boy who was missing for 10 months, was not the enemy. The government was not interested. He had shown a power too dangerous to roam freely in the world. Besides, they had to be able to show a face as guilty of the death of the 2 professional heroes and 26 promising heroes. But that was just an excuse to calm the monarch of the most powerful family in Japan, the Yaoyorozu, since his daughter had been among those who disappeared and did not return with the group that appeared, and to calm them down they had to deliver the head of the culprit on a silver platter. Several trucks entered the apartment area so that dozens of armed men with military defense equipment could get out of the vehicles to go to their target building. Rapid footsteps could be heard climbing the stairs to the apartment, and the door to it was bypassed with a shot. The first soldier entered only to see a red light at the end of the hallway. The soldier was torn to pieces by bullets from a turret that was at the end of the hallway. In that, several soldiers were dragged to the outside of the corridor by enormous spiders that were in the buildings, pulling the soldiers with a material that came out of their bodies to let them fall brutally to the ground or being devoured, so that the other soldiers began to shoot at those monsters. At that point, several soldiers were dragged out of the hallway by enormous spiders that were in the buildings, pulling the soldiers with a material that came out of their bodies to let them fall brutally to the ground or be devoured. Several bloodslakers retreated while others fell to the bullets of the soldiers who were still alive. At that point, a soldier saw a small, tender animal looking at him with its head tilted so that the soldier could aim his gun at it while the animal let out a screech. The soldier shot the creature without hesitation as it began to grow and turn into a monster. The bullets did not kill the creature, but with one bite it ended the soldier's life, and the creature launched itself against the other soldiers and began to tear them apart. The bullets did not kill the creature, but with one bite it ended the soldier's life, and he launched himself against the other soldiers and began to tear them apart. The soldiers began to retreat quickly as they fled from the ferox that mercilessly slaughtered anyone who stood in front of them. The soldiers were preparing to retreat, but then some fireballs hit the trucks, exploding them. Creatures made of lava let out grunts of mockery at the soldiers who had been saved from the explosion as they looked in shock at the situation they were in. A figure in the air saw the mission that became the dinner of some beast that she had never seen in her life. The figure had to dodge thanks to her instincts and a little of her quirk, an invisible figure that launched itself against her. The invisible figure landed safely on a roof so that it slowly became visible in the form of a dragon that reminded him of his partner. The figure of the person who was in the air landed on a roof with his arms in the air and a smile when he noticed that more rock strakes appeared between the roofs, only to see a person with an armor with a technology that he had not seen before. Who was his objective in this massacre that the government caused? The sun began to rise slowly, only to illuminate the streets and buildings with the corpses of the soldiers who had gone after the green-haired man, torn to pieces, devoured or burned. On one of the roofs of the buildings, the rock dragons were still walking on the roofs. The silence had been there for a few minutes as the sun continued to rise. So tired of waiting, she made the peace sign and winked at the one under the technological helmet. "Hawks, hey! Are you still there?" I asked, thinking that I was already dead, surrounded by those beasts. "Genesis, the area within a radius of 20 meters is clear," announced for Izuku to nod as his helmet disappeared. Hawks saw who they sent to catch while also seeing how the dragons disappeared as they had appeared, only to see the cause of this massacre. "Izuku, why did you give up, and not avenge the death of your own? Hawks, why keep fighting a losing battle?" he asked with a small smile. "Izuku, who was responsible for this?" he asked without taking his eyes off the woman who smiled. "Hawks, why should I give you information? What assures me that you will let me leave alive?" he said, tilting his head with a smile. "Izuku, you don't know what you're dealing with." "Hawks, you're kind of right about that." In that, the blonde saw how the sky began to change while the buildings began to disappear, even in the one they were in. Everything created by the hand of the human changed by the hand of nature. What were once streets were now rivers full of life, and what were buildings were enormous forests full of life. "Izuku, this could be a nightmare," he said, taking the blonde out of her surprise as she turned to look at him. "Hawks, where? Where are we?" "Izuku, in a place where survival of the strongest and smartest is the rule," he said while using the tech armor's thrusters to stay in the air. "Isn't it beautiful how beautiful and cruel nature can be?" At that point, the blonde saw a Tyrannosaurus Rex come out of the forest, devouring the remains of its prey just to see them and roar at them. "Izuku, I just want a name. Or you can just go accept your new home, he said as the tech helmet appeared covering his face. Kira Takami thought about the words of that green-haired boy. What did she gain by covering for her bosses? At the end of the day, they would never leave her alone for the simple fact of saving her when she was a child and her father was killed by mistake in a bank robbery. Hawks, I'll talk, he said as the area changed to a beautiful building in a forest. Izuku, then we have a deal, he said taking the chin of the blonde who frowned. At that the blonde felt a burning in her wrist but did not complain, only to see how a diamond-shaped jewel was embedded in her wrist, only to see the one with whom she had made a deal, only to see a screen in front of her surprising her. Izuku, so? Who was the one who ordered the attack on my mother's home? He asked, looking at the blonde. Hawks, Mal Nock is the president of the Hero Commission. We were sent to calm down the Yaoyorozu family and the death of their daughter. Izuku, Hero Commission and Yaoyorozu family. So they're the ones who want me dead, he said as Hawks scratched his wrist. Hawks, what's this? Izuku, an insurance. For my informant, he said taking the chin of the girl who clicked her tongue in annoyance. Genesis will inform you when he needs something. Hawks, who is Genesis? He asked before disappearing. Winged heroine number 3 Hawks was found unconscious after a group was attacked by heavily armed and dangerous terrorists, was what the Hero Society told the public. Izuku, Genesis. Write down the task separately: Hero Society and Yaoyorozu family. Genesis, understood. The green-haired boy walked through his home hidden among the mountains full of nature near the city where he lived. This home was not only for him, but it was a fortress to protect his mother in case they wanted to see her involved in one of their conflicts. The forest was full of turrets ready to fire at enemies and animals camouflaged in the wild waiting for a snack. The features unlocked after passing the tutorial from the system were many that I never expected to have when I was stuck on the island. Now what would he do? Being a hero was something he lost when he took the first life of a living being with his hands. Conquer the world. No, he had not been brain damaged enough to do so. Enjoy the peace he now had without having to sleep with one eye open, just taking care of the enemies he should have. A square opened showing the members of his party that currently there was only Kira Takami aka Hawks with some minor system functions while the vast majority was blocked. Maybe if this had been in the tutorial the deaths of those idiot brats would have been less than what they were. Izuku calmly looked at the forest while thinking about who could face him. He had the Titans at his side, apart from technology that surpassed the current one by years, and even if they managed to lock him up and kill him, he could always come back with the same or greater strength. Izuku, they'll just be a nuisance. It's nothing to worry about. Maybe the best thing would be to rule this world with his power, but that didn't interest him since he only wanted to enjoy the tranquility of returning home. The green-haired boy saw several families or people simply going to their destination calmly, while some looked with excitement at the heroes who patrolled. Izuku looked at a blue screen in front of him that showed the entire map of the Earth, although currently he was only seeing the city he was in, making sure the location was correct. Mal Nock, are you not going to say anything, or am I wrong? Asked the president of the Hero Society, looking at the number 3 heroine of the top. Hawks, I don't know what you're talking about. Mal Nock, your master was someone who followed orders until it broke. But I will not make the same mistake as the previous president, he said, looking at his bodyguards. Hawks, really? It won't be strange that the last place they saw me was this building, he said, watching as the bodyguards pointed their weapons at him. Mal Nock, don't worry. They will forget you. We have made others forget in the past, he said, looking at the blonde. At that an alarm began to sound at the same time that the building began to shake. Red feathers rose into the air so that the president of the Hero Society saw with terror the emotionless face of Hawks. On the main floor of the building he was attacked when the walls were crossed by a herd of mammoths that passed without problem through the entire building and disappeared before going out again to the street. Amidst all the chaos, the green-haired boy began to walk calmly, followed by a pack of velociraptors who, with a whistle, began to run throughout the building. Those who were on the ground or in a panic position were ignored by the prehistoric killing machines. But it was not the same luck for those heroes or agents who wanted to be recognized by the high command for their heroic deeds. The green-haired boy calmly went up to the upper floors while he saw what his animals caused. Izuku, using his tech armor-covered fists, deflected the door in front of him while the velociraptors waited to tear apart whoever was inside. Once the door fell silent, a whistling sound was heard, so the velociraptors stayed in the hallway waiting for orders. The green-haired boy entered without any concern, only to see in the room that blonde who was with those who had gone to catch him a few days ago, covered in blood while several mutilated bodies were adorning the floor. Mal Nock, son of a bitch, screamed on the ground while Hawks pointed one of his sword feathers at him. Now what are you going to do? We saved you. Your life belongs to us. Izuku, it seems you saved me some trouble, he said, walking without taking his hands out of his pants pockets. Hawks, why are you here? He whispered, looking at the green-haired boy while he lowered his sword a little. Izuku, you attacked, and because of that, what was my home and my childhood was destroyed. Did you think there would be no consequences? He said, seeing the president of the Hero Association on the ground, clenching his teeth. Malnok, you are a menace, I shouted so that the green-haired boy shook his head with a small smile. Izuku, if I wanted to. This world would be burning in flames, he said with a smile that terrified the president of the Hero Association of Japan. Let this be a warning to others, he said to turn around. Hawks watched as the green-haired man retreated. Only to hear a whistle in the area, and from where the green-haired man had come out, a pack of velociraptors entered savagely and began to disembowel the president of the Japanese Hero Association before the eyes of the number 3 heroine of this country. Hawks left there while the velociraptors continued with their thing. The blonde saw the chaos that the Hero Society building had become to see in the distance how the green-haired man retreated among the chaos. A dozen heroes and even more government agents were massacred in less than an hour in their own facilities. And even more so when the president of these was brutally murdered. Only pieces of her clothing and bones with fang marks were found. The media described that attack more as a terrorist attack than a confrontation between heroes and villains. The lesser-known villains thought that it was because of the League of Villains that had not acted again, while some more involved in the business knew that someone else had the power to directly attack the Hero Association. Many heroes resigned, most of them being talented young people who had been recruited by the Hero Association to work in the main building of this. Meanwhile, the more veteran ones were charged with finding the person responsible for this. In one of the most important properties in Japan, there was complete silence and tranquility. Between the long and luxuriously decorated corridors of the mansion, a woman with black hair and a cold look walked with elegance and power. Between the long and luxurious decorative corridors of the mansion walked with elegance and power a woman with black hair and a cold look. The monarch of the most powerful family in Japan, Dai Yaoyorozu, could have ended everything in her country with just her word, but Dai, come out. I know you're there, he said, only to see several wolves emerge from the darkness and growl at him. The wolves stopped growling when a whistle was heard so the black-haired girl could see a male face staring at her while her hair was covered by a hood. Dai, tell me. Did you kill my daughter? I asked, looking at the stranger. Izuku, no, she decided to stop following my rules. Dai, he was always a disgrace. Just like his father, he said so that his hand glowed and the wolves growled at the woman. Can't I have one last drink? He asked while a wine appeared in his hand. A whistle was heard as a bottle and some crystal glasses appeared from the black-haired girl's hands in the dim light of the moon that appeared. Dai, how many of my bodyguards have you killed? He asked while pouring the drink into the glasses. Izuku, they haven't found any, he said while the brunette took the wine from the glass. Dai, I'm glad, everyone had a family, he said to see the green-haired boy. I see you very calm. Maybe the heroes are on their way. Izuku, I don't care. They can't beat me, he said just to get closer to the black-haired girl. Why did you send those soldiers to attack me? Dai, he was the man I have as a husband. Do you think I will throw away everything that my ancestors have created just for a dishonor? I asked to continue drinking the wine. He never listened to me, he is just like his father. Thinking that they have control of everything, I shouted while the green-haired man remained silent. When he found out about the attack on the Hero Association building, he fled to Russia. In the end, it is up to me to repair the shit they do, I shouted while throwing the glass of wine to the ground. The green-haired man took the other glass of wine to drink the liquid and without saying anything he left, leaving the black-haired man alone. He already had the second person in charge. The snow fell steadily, only for several armed men to stop, taking cover between the trees, waiting. Until rapid footsteps were heard and the men were quick to fire at some saber-tooths that launched themselves at them. The animals began to tear the men apart without any mercy while in the distance a figure ran in panic through the snow. The green-haired boy was standing in the snowy forest. The snow was falling on his shoulders, which were covered by a cloak, as he looked at the man in front of him. The green-haired boy was standing in the snowy forest, the snow falling on his shoulders, which were covered by a cape, as he looked at the man in front of him. The pride of Mother Russia 3 Bep, although he didn't know what it really meant. Izuku watched the man say several things without understanding, so he laughed before launching himself at high speed against him. The green-haired man stepped back a little without any significant damage, thanks to the tech armor, only to see the Russian with animal-like hands glowing in a red color. The pride of Mother Russia launched itself against the green-haired man again, but before he could touch him, his hand was held by Izuku. A direct blow to the face sent the Russian flying through a dozen trees, creating chaos thanks to the tech armor. The green-haired man was going to leave until he heard some screams that he didn't understand, only to see the pride of Mother Russia with his face destroyed and bleeding nonstop. At that point, the Russian fell to his knees when something thin pierced his neck. "Izuku, do you have it?" he asked, only to hear a flapping sound as someone landed next to him. "Hawks, he's cornered in a ravine. He's too cowardly to jump," he said, walking next to Izuku. "Izuku, I understand. That heroine who was under orders to be saved and who was betrayed by the only thing she had left, her mother, for her own benefit decided to follow the one who had defeated her. Why? Because it was much better than being a faithful lamb of that unfortunate woman." "Get away! Get away!" that man shouted, looking in terror at the ravine behind him and only hearing the growls of the saber-tooths. The Mr. Yaoyorozu smiled when he saw those animals lower their heads and see the number 3 heroine of Japan present accompanied. They had come to save him. It was his thought while he looked at the heroine, but in an instant he was grabbed by the neck by the stranger while with his eyes he asked for help to Hawks, who simply caressed one of the saber-tooths. "Izuku, death would be very good for a piece of trash like you," he said, holding the crying Mr. Yaoyorozu by the neck, "so let's play a game." Hawks watched as a light surrounded Mr. Yaoyorozu before she disappeared from the green-haired man's grasp, and he walked towards her while shaking his hands. "Hawks, was it the same place?" I asked curiously. "Izuku, no, one worse." Mr. Yaoyorozu fell on his butt in the sand only to see and panic more sand and mountains in the distance. At that the ground began to shake so that an extremely large worm emerged from the sand, so that Mr. Yaoyorozu screamed in terror before being swallowed by the worm while stretching out his arm asking for help. The worm burrowed back into the ground, leaving behind the arm of Mr. Yaoyorozu with a diamond-shaped gem embedded in his wrist in the sand. The nightmare had only just begun for the man who was once one of the richest men in Japan. The nightmare had only just begun for the man who was once one of the richest men in Japan. "Hawks, now what do we do?" he asked, walking with the green-haired boy. "Izuku, nothing, they were the ones who caused the attack. As long as they don't bother me, they can rest easy." Hawks nodded, feeling a little calm, believing that she would finish off all the governments and heroes in the world, but apparently she just wanted peace, and that calmed her down. The UA Academy director sighed as he continued to approve the students' request to leave the academy. The last accident had left the already questionable reputation of the academy in tatters, only for this latest accident to leave it in tatters. The academy had lost ties with the Hero Association that was chaos after the attack they received, and their greatest opponent, the Yaoyorozu, cut ties. The heroes who taught at their academy were now on the streets trying to control the situation that had gotten out of control. "Are you sure what Mr. All for One says?" asked a man in a doctor's coat looking at a screen. "All for One, yes. I remember noticed the difference when that woman inherited him. All Might has not inherited One for All," he said with a smile. "He does not have a successor, doctor." "I thought that with Shigaraki's plan frustrated I would let the waters calm down," said the doctor looking at the screens. "All for One, no, it's the right time to act." The green-haired boy was in his home while his still doubtful partner had gone to her home. Izuku was still looking at the new functions of the system, wondering what this had been created for. And that he heard how the door of his home was knocked, so he let out a sigh to go see. "Izuku, what are you doing here?" I asked, seeing a green hair. "Ragdoll, this is our land, don't you remember?" he said with a smile while tilting his head. "What do you think of the place?" "Izuku, calm down," he said, so Ragdoll smiled. In the forests of Spain there was a hunter hunting illegally. The hunter was already carrying his prey, a deer, until he heard a growl and quickly turned around aiming his rifle only to see a wolf. But the hunter was surprised to see the wolf while a black substance with purple was on his body. The hunter did not have time to scream when an owl ripped off his head with the same substance on its body. That substance was spreading through the trees of the forest. The streets were in chaos due to the recent accidents in which Izuku Midoriya had been directly involved, but people did not know about this, and the only culprits were the heroes. Families worried about their children gathered with those who felt repressed by society and those who hate the heroes. "It's chaos outside, isn't it?" a man asked while cooking. "The heroes can't stop the protesters." "Izuku, I don't care what you do," he said while eating katsudon while the cook shook his head. The green-haired man knew that now that the two responsible people behind his head were out of the game, the heroes would not bother him, so he could enjoy the tranquility of the society in which he grew up when he was a child. The green-haired man saw how the restaurant's light went out for a few moments to return to normal. The strongest heroine in the United States and considered by some in the world, Star and Stripe, walked through white corridors. She had been urgently called by her superiors to a research facility. Star and Stripe, what's going on? I asked, looking at a group of scientists until one spoke up. 28 hours ago, a group of officers went to a small town between the mountains, said the scientist as he walked to a table. They found everyone massacred because of this. He said to uncover a bear with a purple/black substance all over its body. We think it's because of a quirk. Star and Stripe, so there's a danger on the loose, he said, looking at the dead animal and shaking his head. Is it contagious? He asked, only to hear loud knocks on a reinforced glass. America's #1 heroine saw a police officer with that thing all over his body like he was a zombie. Infection quirks have been seen in the past and currently, and most of them are very well recorded, but maybe they missed something. We're looking for a cure. But we don't know the number of infected people that may be on the loose, said the scientist, so that Star and Stripe nodded. Star and Stripe, I'll take care of it. The green-haired boy knew that his mother would surely miss her home, but going back would be dangerous. Even if he already finished off those responsible, someone could be looking for revenge. Izuku raised an eyebrow when he saw Genesis appear floating around him. Genesis, your world is coming to an end, he said, so that Izuku would be confused. Eliminate corruption or evacuate to another world, the choice is yours. Izuku, Genesis. What do you mean? Genesis, this world was affected by corruption. The green-haired boy remembered that dead technological land. Not even the greatest technology could stop the advance of corruption to end life. Villages around the world were destroyed as corruption advanced in great strides. Russia, Spain, the United States, Brazil, Egypt, Australia, India were among the first to be affected by corruption in communities among nature. The affected countries thought it was because of a quirk, so they looked for the responsible or a cure. But this was more powerful than they could imagine. The green-haired boy didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He hadn't realized before when he brought the blonde with wings to this place, but the island that was his nightmare for a couple of years was now 10 or 15 times bigger than before, as if it were a continent. Izuku covered his face with his hands. Now he had to be the hero of the world or lose that world and start a new one in the place that was his nightmare for years, and neither of the two options pleased him. The crew of Oki Mariner were on their daily morning patrol until something collided from the bottom of their ship, shaking everything so that a roaring head emerged from the sea. An animal that was considered extinct, a plesiosaur, ate a crew member of the ship, only for him to shake his head when a harpoon was stuck in his neck. Selkie, get us out of here, the seal man shouted to the rest of his crew. The plesiosaur followed them even when the ship started, only to receive a blow from Selkie that stunned him for a few moments while the hero fell on the deck of the ship. Selkie fell to his knees while holding the arm with which he had hit the animal, only to see how that purple/black substance spread at high speed along his arm. Serious, Captain, I screamed worriedly. Selkie, get away. Everyone get away, he shouted as his voice became less understandable and corruption took over him. At that, the plesiosaur rose again from the sea to devour another member of the crew along with a piece of the ship. At that, the plesiosaur was rammed and taken to the sea by a mosasaurus with a tech armor, while on the deck of the Sky a figure fell, seeing who had been consumed by the corruption. Izuku, I'm not a hero. But I can't just stand there doing nothing, he thought as the hood covering him fell to the ground. Serious, wait, he screamed, but in an instant his mentor's head was destroyed by that unknown person. The blue-haired girl gasped as her mentor's body fell lifeless to the ground. The green-haired man only cleaned his gloves to see the crew members who were still alive. Izuku, those with animal characteristics will be more affected. You better leave, he said while a quetzal with a platform on its back descended from the air to the ship. The green-haired man gave the warning, believing that the blue-haired girl would throw herself at him or the corpse to hug it, but no, his companions took her to the quetzal so that it would leave. The green-haired man did not have much information about the corruption, only that it affected organic and non-technological beings, and it was very difficult for him to infect those with technology. The green-haired man set fire to the ship to dive into the sea. If the sea was consumed by corruption, this world was already dead. The green-haired man saw how his mosasaurus tore apart the plesiosaur along with all the fish it had infected. The green-haired boy, thanks to the tech armor, communicated to the mosasaurus that he was retreating. It wasn't working. The fish around it kept getting infected. This was the end of this world. Humanity soon realized that this was destroying all life wherever it was found. Animals, plants and humans were the target of this. The greatest scientists located on Island tried to find a cure. But the island was sunk in the sea by aquatic and aerial animals that had been infected. Evacuations began in the most infected areas, but the governments could not handle so much. So the people rose up, breaking the rules and so arming themselves and using their quirk they tried to confront the infected. Thousands of dead began to be reported all over the world. The green-haired man walked through a vast desert, noticing that it had grown larger than the last time he was there. Izuku continued walking while stepping on human bones. The ground began to shake and a death worm emerged from the sand, trying to devour it, only for it to be taken by a huge hand made of wood. Izuku continued walking while stepping on human bones. The ground began to shake and a death worm emerged from the sand trying to devour him, only for him to be taken by a huge hand made of wood. The green-haired boy continued walking through the sand while the forest titan cut the death worm in half to follow him. Wherever the forest titan passed, trees began to emerge in the middle of the desert. Izuku, it's like everything has been adapted for a huge number of humans, he said, noticing a smaller number of aggressive and more docile animals. A shotgun appeared in Izuku's hands, so he could fire it several times, destroying an arthropleura that had emerged from the sand to attack him. Even though there were fewer aggressive animals, it was still a very dangerous area, and even more so in the air, which was dominated by the dragons. People wanted answers about what was happening, but no one had a concrete answer, or well, whoever had the answer had not yet decided what to do. Bastionist, things are getting ugly outside, hero number 4 said, looking out a window at the chaos that was the streets. Mirko, why don't we just beat him up? Heroine number 7 asked as she leaned back in her seat. Yoroi Musha, little girl, don't you understand the gravity of the situation? Hero number 8 asked to Mirko's annoyance. Mirko, do you have any old problems? Edge shot, relax, we're not in a time to fight each other, said hero number 4 with his eyes closed. Where are All Might and Hawks? Endeavor, we have not had contact with Hawks since the attack on the Hero Society offices, said the number 2 hero with his arms crossed, and the American blonde is trying to fix things outside, although it is useless. Bastionist, that's why we met, to find out the seriousness of the situation, she said while adjusting her hair. Without the resources of the Hero Association, we are having problems. Crust, we think that all the villages outside the cities have already been infected, hero number 6 said through tears. We don't know the number of casualties and how long it will take them to reach a big city. Ryukyu, should we start evacuating? Heroine number 9 asked. Bastionist, it would be the best, but we have nowhere to go. The rest of the countries have been affected and those that haven't are still preparing to defend their people. The best thing would be to calm the people down so we can protect them. The smile that conveyed confidence and tranquility of All Might was increasingly lost as he saw the chaos that was the city. People were afraid of that and he did not know how to protect them since many had died without him being able to do anything. The police were trying to keep civilians from entering a warehouse where food and firearms were being stored, but this was useless since people were worried about their families. Everyone thought that chaos would break out when the first shot rang out from anywhere, but it wasn't like that. Everyone turned to look at the same place when a roar was heard, thinking that the infection had arrived. A Tyrannosaurus Rex emerged from a street wearing tech armor as it roared, intimidating everyone present. The civilians stepped aside when they saw the one protecting them advancing into danger until he was in front of the dinosaur. All Might saw the animal that was as fantastic as it was shown in museums and history books, but then he saw a person get off the T-Rex's head and fall a few meters in front of him. All Might, you were with the young ones in the accident, he said, looking at Izuku's face while in his mind some memories began to torment him. Are you responsible for this? Izuku, I don't want to talk about this here, he said so that All Might could see how a light began to blind him. In a nearby building, someone on the roof of this building saw how everything had calmed down after the appearance of the green-haired boy with the dinosaur. Hawks, you said you would only talk, he whispered after seeing the symbol of peace and the green-haired boy disappear. The sun shone on All Might's skin as he looked out over the vast moss while the sand was beneath his feet. All Might fell to his knees as he spat out blood after having received a blow to his wound, only to see the green-haired man who was watching him from above. Izuku, the only thing I cared about was getting out of that nightmare, he said looking at All Might who was slowly standing up, but after leaving. The memories from before began to emerge. So, can I be a hero without a quirk? He asked so that All Might looked at the ground while bleeding. All Might, I'm sorry, he said only to be sent flying through several palms. On the ground All Might remembered the image of a nervous green-eyed young man with almost no muscles, only for that to turn to dust, now appearing those green eyes that looked at him without emotion, ready to finish him off. Grudge and revenge? Not at all. If that was the reason he was slaughtering All Might, he would have gone to burn down the Bakugo's house first. It would only show who is the alpha in this situation, and whoever doesn't follow the rules will simply end up with him. A gunshot scared the nearby animals, only for the symbol of Peace's body to fall to the ground with his head pierced by a bullet. The rest of the top heroes were going to leave when they were informed that All Might disappeared with an unknown person. When they were going to leave, they saw a dozen military personnel putting order in the streets and in the building. Endeavor, who's in charge? He asked, only to hear someone lighting a cigarette with the flames of his suit. Die, you all better calm down, he said while smoking a cigarette, and follow my orders, he said, blowing a cloud of smoke in Endeavor's face. The sunlight blinded him, only to realize that there was no pain at all. Even that pain he had been living with for the past few years. That mortal wound that the demon had given him had disappeared. Izuku, I don't hate you, but I don't admire you either, he said, sitting on a rock while All Might sat in the sand, but I need someone everyone trusts. All Might, what does this mean? He asked, looking at a diamond-shaped gem in his hand. Izuku, the world is dying. And I am the only one who has the key to another habitable one. The green-haired boy sighed when he received a message from Hawks that went to his current location, and he was not an idiot. It was the Yaoyorozus residence where he was located when the message was sent. Izuku knew one thing, and that is that if they wanted him dead, they would have tried to finish him off the first time he went there. Izuku re-entered the Yaoyorozu grounds, which were as quiet as the first time he came. The green-haired man walked through the halls until he entered a library where he saw that black-haired woman calmly reading a book. Die, you took longer than I expected, he said as he took a glass of wine to drink it. Izuku, where's the blonde? Die, Takami is taking a bath in her room, the girl deserves such luxuries, he said while placing the book and the glass on a small table. Are you wondering why I do this? He asked while walking towards the green-haired boy. It was the only way I found to bring you here. Izuku, what do you want? Die, know what's happening, he said so that the green-haired boy could see some images in his hands, that thing that's infecting. What is it? Izuku, corruption can be said to be a virus that ends all life. It is slowly killing the planet with every living being on it, he said, looking into the eyes of the black-haired girl who sighed. Die, in the end. Everything is over. But you look very calm to know that this is the end. Izuku, it seemed that humanity was doomed. But he was blessed with an ability to save it, he said so that Dai turned to see him. Die, a quirk? Izuku, no, something more powerful. I'm not a hero who saves lives with a smile, he said, knowing that he had let people die before. I don't want to become a saint, but I just can't just watch my home die. Die, you will fight to the death against that like a hero. Izuku, no, I will leave the door open for those who want to live, he said to Dai's confusion. Die, there is no safe place, dozens of countries are currently being consumed by corruption. Izuku, this world is dead already. I'm talking about the door to another world. At that, Dai Yaoyorozu was shocked when in an instant he went from being inside his home to under the sun on the seashore. The black-haired girl felt a little dizzy from the levels of pure oxygen in the air, but nothing to worry about. Dai, where are we? Izuku, I called it. Island, maybe here humanity can start over, but this island is full of dangers, he said, only to see a fin sticking out of the water in the sea. Dai, tell me one thing. What happened to that attempt by man? I asked, looking at the green-haired man. Izuku, he is in a nightmare that not even death can take him out, he said, just to see how the black-haired girl got closer to him, feeling his breath. Dai, I'll make sure this place is safe. You make sure the heroes don't do anything stupid, he said so that his lips brushed against the green-haired boy's. The green-haired boy closed his eyes when Dai walked away from him to sigh while shaking his head to return to the world that was dying. First Ragdoll and now her, was there something he still didn't understand? Hawks, did something bad happen? Izuku, we have something to do, he said to leave, followed by Hawks. How did they find you? He asked so that the blonde pointed to her neck where there was a small scar. Hawks, apparently I had a locator implanted in my neck, don't worry, they already removed it, he said with a smile. And what are we going to do? Izuku talked to the symbol of peace. Endeavor, and who put you in command? He asked, looking at Dai Yaoyorozu only for her to point behind her. Izuku, do we have a problem, Endeavor? He asked, followed by All Might, who was still processing what happened. Endeavor, yeah, who the fuck do you think you are to give us orders? Izuku, the only one who can make their lives longer. Or do you want to face the corruption on your own? He asked, only for All Might to pass by him. All Might Enji, you better relax. This is bigger than we imagined, he said, taking his partner's shoulder so that the black-haired girl would leave. Dai, did everything go well? Izuku, yes, continue with your preparations, he said so that the black-haired girl nodded. The green-haired man was at the lower base of the green obelisk that was the most centered on the enormous island. The green-haired man saw that now the console on the platform did not let him go to the area of one of the bosses, but now it let him put in some coordinates. A pack of raptors began to walk slowly towards the green-haired man after crossing a small river, only for them to be torn to pieces by a pair of Therizinosaurus. The green-haired man finished placing the coordinates only for the dome of the platform to begin to form until it closed. Dai Yaoyorozu shook her head as she watched a transparent dome begin to appear in the courtyard of her home, revealing that prehistoric world. Dai, you know what the job is. So get started. The green-haired boy watched as heavy machinery and cargo trucks began to appear through the dome, only for a roar to be heard coming from a hungry Carnotaurus, only for it to stop when a Spinosaurus roared, challenging it to pass. The builders were stunned by the battle before their eyes. Izuku, gentlemen. That's why you're here, to make a safe perimeter for them. The green-haired man had the ability to create any object that was in the system, but doing what the black-haired man had planned will be impossible for a person with time against them. A great city had fallen to corruption as a beast that had been waiting for its master's call had been consumed by corruption while waiting for that call. The last images of the survivors of the city showed a giant with an armor of rocks covered by that black, purple substance before crushing the building where the images were being taken.